Welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People.
Hey everybody, and welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People with Peter and Andrew, where we talk about our own approach to screenwriting and filmmaking, discuss great works of cinema, and blasphemously imagine how they could be remade. This week we'll be talking about The Graduate, giving an update on our current screenplay project, and talking about what we've been watching. But first of all, I'm Peter, successful filmmaker, film professor, and screenwriter, and this is Andrew.
Screenwriter, filmmaker, but not a plastic salesman by choice.
This week we've actually been quite busy with a couple different film projects and different things going on. A little less time working on the screenplay that we've been working on, but we will redouble our efforts moving into the future. This has been a nice thing, just to have a lot of different irons in the fire. And this actually speaks to a question we have from a listener this week. This is coming in from Jake's asking, I have a really busy schedule. I'm doing lots of things, and I find myself having lots of different ideas for writing. How do you decide what to write, or do you write multiple things at the same time? Okay, that's a great question. I think that, a couple parts of that. One is, how do you decide what to write? And we've talked about this before, but I think, what makes, what are your own signals for this is a script worth spending time on? And then I guess another part of that question is, does it work to work on multiple things at the same time? Does that feel like you're splitting your attention, or is that a really nice way to split your attention? What's your take on that, Andrew?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's probably different for different people, but I don't have an issue working on multiple things at the same time. I kind of think it's fun in a way, because if you're excited about something, you want to at least get started on it, write it down, see how that goes. But oftentimes you either hit a roadblock at some point, or another thing comes up that you want to work on. But that I think there's some value to stepping away from a project for a while and then coming back to it later with fresh eyes. So I think in like those in-between states, if you have gone really far in something and you're kind of stuck, like, I don't know where to go from here. Or if you finished like a draft of something and then you give it time, work on something else, come back to it. I think that's really helpful. And so I think working on multiple things at the same time can be a benefit. I don't know if it works well for everybody. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot depends on why you're working on multiple things at the same time. I think, in terms of what is worth your time, it's worth your time if you're passionate about it. It's worth your time if you can see where the story actually goes and it's not just one idea. And it's worth your time if somebody's paying you to do it, or if it's something you're doing collaboratively with other people who are depending on you, who you're building up relationships with. I mean, if there are external reasons to do it, I've done a number of projects where it wasn't my most passionate, the thing that I was most interested in, but I was working with other people or being paid to do it, and that's a reason to do it. But I think if you're working on something and you just keep procrastinating by coming up with a different idea. Okay, well, this script, I've hit a roadblock, so I'm just going to work on something else. And you're not going to just flow freely with that one either. You're going to hit a roadblock. And if your answer to hitting a roadblock is always just to come up with something new, then you're never going to finish anything. And I think that is a problem that writers often have is just not finishing something because it got hard, and so they moved on to something else. But taking a break from something, taking a break from one specific project, still using your mind and working on something else, I think that can be useful if you're, let me put this aside, think about it, but not really work on it while I spend my energy working on something else. I think that could be a good, time management kind of thing. And I think that can also give your brain a little rest and come at the project with fresh eyes. So I think it totally can work to work on multiple projects at the same time, just not as an escape route. It should be like a practical consideration, not a way to avoid work.
That's a very good film professor answer. It's what I would come to a professor to hear. So I think that was great.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that there's, I think that also sometimes it can be nice to work on different kinds of things. Maybe that's just different kinds of screenplays. I'm working on my comedy, and then I'm taking a break from that to work on a
Yeah.
drama, something like that. Or it could also be I'm doing my creative writing, which is all in the form of this one screenplay, but then I'm also working on a filmmaking project that I'm trying to set up, or I'm doing the distribution and marketing for a film project, and using different parts of your brain, using different skills. I think, and Jake says he's very busy with lots of other things in life. And yeah, we have limited time to work on film and writing projects, but of the time that you're spending on that, even then, it doesn't all need to be in one direction. It could be in these sort of different categories as long as you're moving things forward.
Well, and many major film directors, writers, they're always working on a movie that they're filming while writing the next movie that's coming up. Because it seems like as soon as they finish one, they're like, this is the next movie that's coming out in 2 years. So they already have something going. So I think a lot of people work this way. Maybe not Tarantino. He seems like he takes a long time between movies, but a lot of directors are just always working on the next thing. So you're writing and you're directing or whatever at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that works especially. It is hard to write two things at the same time, but to write something while you're filming something, those are different exercises, different parts of your brain, and I think you could do that. So thanks for the question, and I hope that's helpful. It's something we're all struggling with and working on. So great.
What have you been watching?
So what have you been watching, Andrew?
This week I watched the Ready or Not 2, Here I Come, which is based on Ready or Not. And I really liked the first movie, the Ready or Not, when it came out. It's kind of if you're not familiar with it, it's, I would say, more of a slasher thriller type movie, but with a lot of comedy. And I think that's a good balance in a movie when you can make a movie that's really kind of action, slasher heavy, and have a good amount of comedy to carry you through it. Because I find in a lot of these movies, the emotional through line is just often lacking. And you're like, I just want more of the slasher stuff, or just have this move faster. But in this one, I think it's pretty similar to the first movie, to where it's fun and it's exciting and it moves pretty quickly. The premise of this one is very similar to the first one in that, so the first one, she marries into this family, and they're some type of, like, I think it's Illuminati, something or other, where they kind of control the world, but you have to play a game, and she draws hide and seek. So she has to hide, and then they try to find her and kill her before sunrise. And if they don't, then something bad happens to them. And then in the second one, they're like, oh, well, there's these other families that are involved in this Illuminati type club. I think they're called, I don't know what they're called, but, and then they have to now find her since she survived and do the whole thing all over again. So the premise is very similar, but I think the premise works because it is fun, except this time she's also with her sister. So you have kind of a different dynamic in that it's two people trying to survive together. And, I don't know. I thought it was really fun. I'd recommend going to see it if you liked the first one. I would imagine it's not everybody's style of movie, though. But I enjoyed it.
Is she getting married again, or this is just another family gathering?
It's not getting married. So these are other families that are part of the group that aren't related. And the idea is if they have to start the game again. And if they don't kill her before sunrise, then now they lose all their power as well. Okay. And so it's like this really, it's very similar, but she's not getting married. And it kind of picks up exactly where the first one left off. If you saw the first one. So it's just like right from there, we're going into a new one. Pretty intense couple days for this woman, if you think about it. But yeah, it's all fun.
Well, very cool. I have been watching, two kind of similar things. I watched this new Netflix series, Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen, which is very thematically similar. It's basically a young woman is getting married and goes to her husband's like mountain cabin, like secluded house for the wedding. And you don't know what's going to happen, but something very bad is going to happen. And you get the sense that lots of people are going to die. And it's sort of building up to that over several episodes. And I haven't actually finished it. I do know a little bit about what's going to happen, but it's been interesting. And I think it's just what we talk about, how the wedding, finding these structures that happen in real life, like the birthday party or the I think the wedding is a great one, because there's so many like specific things that happen with that you can structure your story around. It's a high stakes, high emotions thing that lots of people can relate to. And that one is like real creepy horror kind of approach. I also just saw The Drama in theaters, which I loved. This is my kind of movie. Also about a wedding. Also, it's really not a horror movie, but it's kind of like Wedding Gone Wrong, or like it kind of is like, what's the worst thing that could happen as you're preparing to get married? And basically this couple is engaged, they're about to get married, and they play a game of, let's say, the worst thing that we've ever done. This couple and then a friend of like a couple's friends. So 4 people each say the worst thing that they've ever done. And the bride to be says something that everyone decides is so much worse than everything else that they now can't look at her the same way. And then the movie goes from there. And I think it's a really, really interesting movie. It's funny in parts. There's a really funny sequence with the DJ at the end. It's like just a little minor part, but I think there are a lot of funny parts to the movie. But it's both kind of dealing with these big social issues, dealing with like what is really bad, like what does it mean to do a bad thing, or are you a bad person for having wanted to do a bad thing? But I think also it's just playing into the anxiety that comes with getting married, and the idea of like, do you ever really know this person, or like how much could you have known this person? Are these things that, in this case, it's a pretty bad thing that he finds out about her, but there are all sorts of things that like you didn't know before you got married that you find out later, and like how big a deal is that going to be? And I think that is just a really universal experience, but this takes it to the nth degree.
So this movie is more of like the fallout from figuring that out. Is this like a first act, they figure out what she did, and then it's kind of just played out from there? Or is the secret kind of the real storyline?
So it's basically like the first act is it comes out what she did. Then the second act is largely, are they still going to get married? Is her whole, like, is everyone else in her life going to abandon her? Like, what's going on with that? And then the third act is, it seems at least like they still are going to get married. And so the third act then is, what does the actual wedding look like?
Right. Oh, that sounds interesting. It's hard to tell because I've seen the preview and it's like, I just don't know what to think of this. But you want to go in blind, I'm assuming. You don't want to know.
I mean, I actually did know what her thing was, and that didn't really. It's not like the specific fact itself isn't a make or break kind of like twist. So I think you could know. I'm not going to share it here, but I think so much of it is just like, what would you then do if you're her, if you're him?
Right.
One of the other friends shared something that I think in many ways is worse, but everyone seems to move on from that. And so there's some interesting elements of just like, what do we consider bad and things like that.
Right. So that's I guess a good thing for this movie. If it's not, the reveal isn't everything. There's a lot more to it after the reveal. It's still worth it. Yeah.
And I've heard some criticism that a lot of people don't like the way that this specific issue that comes up is dealt with. And it's sort of a hot button issue. And I feel like that's a fair criticism as far as it goes. But I don't think the movie is specifically about the specifics of what she did as much as it is like, what do you do in the aftermath of this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of my favorite movies that I've seen in quite a while. So
Really
I would recommend it for people that have similar taste to me. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but yeah, I really liked it. The
nice.
drama.
Hey, Peter, what time is it?
Yeah, 11:47.
Wrong. It's lime time.
That's not a real time, Andrew.
It is now, thanks to Dunkin' and Bliss's newest flavor, Lime Time. It's like regular lime, but with more time.
What does that even mean?
Nobody knows, but it tastes incredible.
Tangy, creamy, and scientifically proven to make you 23% more punctual.
That statistic sounds made up.
Everything about Dunkin' and Bliss sounds made up, but the flavor is real.
So Lime Time ice cream can actually slow down time itself?
It can't alter time, but it can alter your taste buds.
Dunkin' and Bliss Lime Time, because it's always the right time for an absurd amount of ice cream.
Now, let's get into our movie of the week, The Graduate. What can you tell us about that, Andrew?
The Graduate, 1967, directed by Mike Nichols. A delusioned college graduate finds himself torn between his older lover and her daughter. And I mean, that's a pretty simple logline for this one, but there's not really a lot more to this. It does kind of feel like that's the premise here. There's these one guy, Dustin Hoffman, who has just graduated from college, and he's got the whole world ahead of him. He's got a bright future, supposedly, and there is one of the parents that he knew growing up, this mother that's good 20 years older than him, kind of seduces him. And so he has to choose between her, and eventually he meets her daughter, and there's kind of this decision and the fallout of all this. What's interesting about this movie, besides the premise, I think, that premise isn't really played out very often, is just how, when you describe this movie, you're like, okay, what is that? Like, is that a drama? Is this a comedy? What is this? And just watching this movie, I had a really hard time like figuring out the tone of this, because there are a lot of there's a lot of dialogue that comes across as comedic that would fit in a comedy. There's a lot of scenes that are like comedic in nature, and yet everybody plays this very seriously, and it's kind of depressing and sad the whole time. And it's kind of like this sad comedy in a way, but I just had a really hard time like wrapping my mind around like, how do you describe this movie? How would you say, like, if you were to describe this? I don't know.
That's a really good question. I mean, I do think there are some funny scenes, and so this is directed by Mike Nichols, who I think does a lot of his films are playing with that like really dramatic but with funny elements, and sometimes he does more comedic, more broadly comedic films. But so I think he's good at this. Yeah, The Graduate. I mean, there's some when Benjamin goes to the hotel. I mean,
Yeah,
that is just
that's
pure
so funny.
comedy. That is just
Yeah,
so funny, and he's playing as good a comedic character as anything Will Ferrell has done.
right.
I mean, it's just so funny. But so much of the movie is just like it's partially troubling. It's just like young man adrift. It's like, what is the movie? I mean, I do think it's just like a thoughtful drama, I guess I would say, with comedic elements. It's
Yeah.
interesting too that I don't think that Benjamin is just a passive character. I think he does active things in terms of, if you were writing this as a script, I think importantly, like,
Hmm.
he is making active choices, but he still is like passive to the greater world around him. Like he makes
Right.
little micro choices, which I think is important for storytelling. But the world around him, he's just such a small player in it. And I think a lot of the movie is about how adrift he feels.
Right. The focus of the movie, I think, gives it that more depressing kind of, the way that he's looking at the world, where his place in it, where he doesn't seem to have a lot of control, what's going on. I think it's funny if you think about it from like a modern perspective, how close this would be to like a Will Ferrell sex comedy or something. There's not a lot you would have to change to just play it a little differently, play it up more. But the premise is just right there. There's so much comedy in this. But like you said, it's really about Benjamin his place in the world, what's he going to do going forward, the decisions he can make, the decisions he can't make, and where he seems trapped in his life. And I think that is kind of what brings this more of to like a drama, more a little subdued in what it could be in another person's hands. That said, I think it works really well. It's a very engaging movie.
Yeah, and I think there's this central relationship between Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson, which it's interesting because he is a graduate, which I think is an
Yeah.
interesting title. And I think there's a lot that's going on there, but he is a college graduate. He's somebody in his early 20s. He's not a child. He's not a teenager.
Right.
And so it's not like she is a predator, preying on a young, on a
He's not a
young
minor.
person. He's not a minor. He is in every legal and social sense an adult. But the dynamic is so tilted and asymmetric that
Yep.
like she's so in control that it feels like a little funny. Like
Yeah.
I was thinking about American Pie, not as good a movie as this, but there's the classic. If you could call American Pie a classic, but there's the Stifler's mom, who is this older woman, and there's the character Finch who ends up with her. Now he is 18, which I think they established in the film, but he's still in high school, and there's this weird dynamic there. And that whole movie is
hmm
a less serious, less significant of a film, I think. But there's something weird about he is still technically in high school. And then I thought of the movie Risky Business with Tom Cruise,
Mm.
where different dynamic, but young man, still technically in high school, with an older woman, Rebecca De Mornay, who's playing like a call girl. She's older. I guess I don't know how much older she is, but she's definitely a lot more sophisticated. She's a lot more mature than him. And I think in that case, like the Tom Cruise like quickly grows up and he's immediately now like matching her and he's in this situation. And Benjamin in The Graduate, I just feel like he he resists Mrs. Robinson for a while, then he, acquiesces and he gets together with her, but he still remains this like adolescent about everything.
hmm
And it's a very weird dynamic that I think that's important because I don't think the movie it's not about her being a predator, even though it kind of feels like that a little bit,
Right.
but it's also not about him like getting this sexual awakening, because I don't think he at the end of the movie is any
No.
more awakened than he was earlier on. He's still just like lost, and so I feel like it's almost like showing all of these different things happening, and he's still as lost at the end as he is at the
hmm
beginning.
Which kind of goes back to we mentioned the title, The Graduate. And technically he graduated, right? So technically he is a graduate and everybody is happy about that. But like in practicality, it doesn't seem like he graduated from anything. It doesn't feel like he actually has any real world knowledge in any way. Like he's more advanced than anybody else his age. It seems like he's still so far behind in so many areas. And I think the title of the movie is kind of playing on that idea of, sure, you went out, you did all the things you're supposed to do, you got the degree, but there's still all these adults in your life can still tell you what to do. You're still not an adult. And that's very clear by his relationship with Mrs. Robinson. He feels like a kid on the inside. He doesn't feel like he has any real control or power in life, even though technically he should. And I guess that's maybe talking about the culture at the time. This was the late 60s, a different time for sure. But I think the title, The Graduate, kind of plays off those ideas.
Yeah, and I just think he's such an adolescent who is playing at being an adult, and he's going to the
hmm
hotel and he's acting like an adult is supposed to play, is supposed to act, but he doesn't really know what he's doing. And then he tries to he's forced to going into a date. He's forced to going on a date with Elaine, and he acts a certain way, but he realizes that's a disaster, and he just doesn't know who he is. And I think the movie makes a point of just showing how clueless he is. And and he never really learns. Like I don't think he
Right.
really knows who he is. The movie has a structure that kind of makes it feel like he's gotten to a point at the end, and I feel like that is satisfying. Both he has a goal, he's trying to connect with Elaine and stop her wedding, and he's trying to win Elaine's heart and overcome the people who are trying to keep him away. And I think he achieves that goal, which is again important on a storytelling level, that you give us some satisfaction, but on a deeper level, I don't I don't think he's really achieved anything, and I don't
Right.
think like he knows any more about the world. And I think that is a lot of the kind of drifting, aimless kind of like approach to life that either everyone throughout time has at that stage of life, or was particular to that era. But I think that's what that's exploring.
Yeah, and I don't think the movie tries to hide that fact because even at the end of the movie, where there's the great scene where he, stops, goes to her wedding, which is just very childlike. The whole situation, like this is what a child would do. No rational person would think this way. And then they get on the bus and they're sitting there, and you have the looks where they're happy, and then they're just kind of like, "What did we just do?" You know. And I think that idea of he got what he wanted, so for the story to work, that works, but as we've said, did he change? Did he learn anything from this? You kind of look at this, whatever they're doing together, this couple, that's not going to last. These kids have no idea what they're doing. Even from Elaine's perspective, it seems like she was kind of pushed into this marriage, and the whole time she's kind of wishy-washy. Yeah, he asked me to marry him. I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. And there's these, just the both of them together just seem so immature or not ready for the next step of life. Like they're just not ready to move on with what they've been because they're so childlike in how they act. And yeah, I think the movie is intentional in showing that that's the case at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and I think what you bring up about Elaine is true, and I think the movie is actually really interesting that nobody is the smart, sensible person in this movie. I mean,
True.
Elaine, like you might think, okay, she's going to be pure and innocent, or she's going to be smarter and more, worldly, whatever. She's just as lost as Benjamin. Like, oh, am
Hmm.
I going to marry this guy? Am I going to marry that guy? He goes to look for the he's staying in a house to for a while, and the guy's there just clueless. He goes to look for the like in the locker room with the Elaine's like the guy she's marrying to find
Right.
his friends to find out where the wedding is. They're all just buffoons. His parents are buffoons.
Hmm.
Mrs. Robinson is interesting, but she doesn't have her life together,
Yeah.
and her husband definitely doesn't have his life together. It's like there's no reasonable person here that Benjamin is. Like I feel like a lot of filmmakers would have had Benjamin is the one who is adrift, and here are these people who are living sensible lives, and he's trying to navigate his way back to being sensible. But I don't think anybody in this is really sensible
Hmm.
or has a good path that clearly is the right way to go. It's almost seems like the film is saying there the old way doesn't really work. The new way, nobody even knows what that means. And so we're all sort of adrift right now.
Hmm. It's kind of like the reason that the world is the way it is isn't because of the younger generation, and the older generation doesn't seem to have the answers either. There, doesn't really seem to be like a mentor type person in this. Like if you look at kind of a similar idea in Goodwill Hunting, which we've talked about, where you have these youth who are kind of aimless, don't know what to do with their lives, but there's a mentor character to kind of pattern to say this is where you should go, this is how you should do things. But in this movie, there's nobody who has any clue what anybody should or shouldn't do. They just get mad when other people do something that you know I don't know that they've said it's right or wrong, sure, but it's not like it's anything different than what they're doing. They don't have the answers, and that seems very clear when when you think about it after the movie. But while you're in it, it's hard to. I don't know. There seems to be like an idea of well, there should be somebody who knows. There should be somebody doing the right thing, and there just isn't. And that's a very strange way to make a film. Like I don't know many movies that do that, where every character is nope, don't they don't know what they're doing either.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you look at the late 60s, it's this time, and I guess this movie came out in 67. So it was probably being worked on in the mid 60s. So it's not really it's probably a product of the mid 60s more than it is of the
Right.
latest 60s. And so it's not the heart of the Vietnam era yet. That's never mentioned. That's not part of the story. But you have this time in the mid to late 60s when there is just all this social upheaval happening, and I think that that takes a lot of different forms, whether it's related to civil rights, whether it's related to Vietnam, but a lot of it just is just generational. And in Germany, there's a big thing that comes. There's a whole generation called the 1968ers. That a lot of that in Germany is specifically about everybody discovering that the people in authority figures, like all the authority figures in Germany in 1968, were Nazis back in the war, and that
Right.
and the country, the Nazis ran things, and so everybody's tarnished, and that's a whole sort of generational awakening that happened in 68 when the young people learned that. It's so weird that in America the same thing happened, even though the Americans were the ones defeating the Nazis, but it
Right.
still is this younger generation sort of turning against the older generation. I think a lot of that is from a similar root. That is, a whole generation went to war and was in the military and came out of that with that kind of military experience. I think that probably is a big part of why both America and Germany had kind of similar 1960s, even though
Hmm.
like how they went into the war was different. I think the fact that they were in the war was more the shaping thing for the future generation. But
Yeah.
but it's this time when nobody has trust in the older generation. But I think
Hmm.
Mike Nichols isn't saying, it's not a revolutionary movie that's saying the younger generation has it figured out. And I think there were a lot of movies in the 60s that were saying the old way is dead, the new generation needs to take over. And I think he's saying, I don't think the new generation knows what it's doing either.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it has an answer. That's an interesting idea. Uh, and if you were to say compare this to Germany, and the kids realize, oh, all of the leaders were Nazis, like that was bad. So these leaders are just full of it. But in America, you would say all the leaders they fought in World War II, and that's considered this great thing. These people were heroes, and they have all this just built-in trust to be like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. I was in the war. Like, okay, you have this trust that you build. But I think this is exploring the idea of it's the same thing. They don't really know. It doesn't seem like this led anywhere, that they have an idea. It's just kind of riding this post-war ride, and it was great for a while, but we haven't actually solved the fundamental issues. There's no truth here that anybody has on either side. And that's a really interesting way to explore this topic. Um, I guess when you compare it, I hadn't thought of how it compares to Germany, but that's interesting that it would be same in both areas.
I mean, you just get all of this social change, and there's also like the sexual revolution. You have the birth control pill that came out earlier in the 60s that changed a lot. You've got relaxing divorce laws, but
Hmm.
it was interesting to me. Like, I don't think that this movie, if it was made now, would be jumping to like the marriage in the same way. Like, I think that is
No.
I think that's a really telling of the time, that that he immediately wants to switch into adult mode. Like, he's like, I like the thing, if I'm interested in Elaine, then the thing we have to do is get married. And not because, it's not like on a religious righteous level. Like, there's no mention of that in the movie. I don't think that's a consideration at all of like chastity and virtue. It's just
Hmm.
like the thing that you do is you get married. And I think that's so illustrative of, they are caught between these social codes of like, there's the old way,
Yep.
and I'm rejecting that, but I've still absorbed that, so I think that's still what you're supposed to do, even though if I'm trying to do it in a totally different way. And I don't know, it's a weird time that they were in.
That I think that leads into why this kind of feels like a comedy from today's perspective. If you were to take place today, this would just have to be a comedy, because for somebody to jump from that to getting married is comedic. Like, the idea of that is just a funny
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like, you could not pass that off as a serious movie, but back then you could. And when you look at like Mrs. Robinson and you get her backstory of, she got pregnant, so she had to get married, and she's just lived this very unfulfilling life her whole life. And it seems like Benjamin is going to head that same way. He's going to just get married and live an unfulfilled life because they're jumping into it so soon without being ready for anything. It does seem like those ideas are like being passed down. And I think culture has changed so much in the last 60 years that a lot of that, there's no way you could play it as straight anymore. But back then, those were real things that people did. This was really how people lived. You really were expected to get married right away. And I think going into this movie, you need to be at least aware of those ideas for this to make any sense, because those were very real pressures that they had in their lives.
I don't think that this movie would work in any other time period because
Hmm.
I think so much. I don't think that the seduction older woman aspect of this is really what the movie's about. I think that's like it gets there like in minute 12. Like
Right.
it is sort of it's definitely the catalyst for the movie. It's the hook for the movie, but I think the movie is really about like identity and this generational shift and this being adrift. And so I think that was, I mean, everybody goes through this as they're growing up, so you could do some exploration of that generational change at different points in time. But I think the late 60s was a particular time that I don't think you're going to do it in the same way if you make the movie at a different time. And I do think that there's something about, like, I think many other movies would have Mrs. Robinson either she's like genuinely a predator with somebody who's
Hmm.
too young, or like she should be with the makeout king, like that Elaine is almost marrying,
Right.
because like she's like after the the frivolous guy who's the opposite of her husband, who's just going to be a good time. I think the fact that she's with passive Benjamin, who she can totally control, I think
Hmm.
that's particular to the time that she is in this marriage where she has no control. She's in a world where she doesn't have control. And so what's attractive about Benjamin to her is that she can totally control him.
Yeah, and the way that this movie is set up, because you do get into that right away. It's almost, one of the very first things that happens is Mrs. Robin shows up, and then you have that whole relationship, which takes you to about the midpoint of the movie, is Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson, how that evolves and how that eventually falls out. And then the second half of the movie is her daughter and Benjamin, and then him trying to get her to marry him, which feels very different. Like this movie feels like it definitely has two halves. And the Mrs. Robinson part is just the means to get into what it feels like what it's really exploring here with this idea of growing up, graduating, and moving on with your life. What does your future have? That the Mrs. Robinson part is kind of the vehicle, really, because this movie does evolve very much past that to where by the end of the movie, you kind of like, you almost forget that even happened. There's references to it, but it just feels very different. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where, when you're thinking of, like, I think that's a good writer instinct to, you come in with the big hook that catches people, that like gets your attention, that makes it really distinctive. Because the idea of him being seduced by Mrs. Robinson is a much more unique kind of story than him. If you're just going to say, oh, well, it's this guy Benjamin trying to navigate a relationship with a young woman, and it's like
Right.
he's adrift in life. The fact that you hook us in with that, even though that's not what the whole movie is. It is, like you're saying, like that's only maybe up to the midpoint, and then it has, after effects, but it really is about Benjamin and his approach to life, kind of, and that's just one part of it. But I think you need that to get people in, and to
Right.
like hook people in.
Yeah, it's it's a great hook. Just that it starts off so quick right away. You're like, oh, we're already into this, and it's just so entertaining. It's funny. Mrs. Robinson is maybe the most interesting person in this movie, even though you don't know much of her backstory. She's just very interesting. You understand she's got this dark past, but you don't quite know what it is. She makes very active choices. She goes after what she wants. She's not passive in the slightest, at least in the beginning. And then at the midpoint, it kind of seems like, oh, she's resigned to her fate. She's gone back to her old ways where she kind of mopes around. But it seems like Benjamin, or the idea of Benjamin, brings this life out of her. It makes her go after something that she wants. And then when he starts dating her daughter, it kind of goes to the reverse, where she just goes back to being passive again. And you kind of, with Benjamin, it's almost flipped, where he's very passive, and then he has something he goes after in the second half, and he wants her daughter, and he's going to marry her, and he becomes very active. But in both ways, it kind of ends with, at the end of the day, they're both unsatisfied. Even if you get what you want, which they both do, it just isn't actually enough. There's not enough meat there to satisfy you.
I really like The Graduate. I think it is one of those things where it's like you walk away from it, like a lot of what you're seeing over the course of the movie is him pursuing Elaine and going after all these things, but like your lingering memory is more of the Mrs. Robinson stuff.
Right.
But it's I find it very funny. I find it interesting. It's like not quite my experience. So like I don't necessarily identify to the same. I mean, in many ways, it's not exactly my experience. But I mean, I think the idea of being a little aimless, I think I can relate to, but not quite to the degree that that Benjamin has here. But it is an interesting story. Do you feel like Benjamin and Elaine are they going to get married and be happy? Are they going to get married and live a, just an empty shell of a life? Is this thing going to be over within a week? Where do you think we leave the movie?
If I had to bet, I'd say over in a week, right? Like, these guys, where are they going in this bus? When they get off the bus, what are they actually going to do? How soon until they just don't get along? Until they're like, you're technically married. She was at the altar. What are you going to do? It just doesn't seem, and I think they're implying that at the end. I don't know. I could be reading into it. How did you come away from it?
I mean, I think it's ambiguous, but I don't, and I think it's a good example of like a film giving you a moment, kind of like Whiplash. It gives you a moment that feels positive, it feels satisfying, but just a little bit of further inspection is like, no, this is not going to work out.
That's true. It is a similar ending to Whiplash, where if you just take this, if we were to see the next couple scenes, they would not be a good place to end this movie.
Yeah. So would you recommend The Graduate?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a unique style of how they tell the story. I think the acting is very well done. It's very interesting. It's engaging. Even if you don't understand the culture of the 60s, which I think if you lived through that time, I think from what I understand, it resonated with people very strongly. But I think even today, there's just something very interesting here to see how this plays out. I just don't know of many movies like this. And I think it's worth it for that alone, just for how unique this feels.
I think it speaks to a moment. I think it's good storytelling. I think it's funny and interesting. And we haven't mentioned this, but the Simon and Garfunkel. I feel like this.
Say that.
It's veering on this. It's veering toward being a musical. I mean, it's not a musical, but I feel like I don't know if I could think of any other film. Oh, maybe Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, but I like very few films where the music, it's not a musical, but the music is so important to the movie.
Mm-hmm. It definitely sets the tone. I think that's a big part of why it feels so melancholy, even though, these things could not be, they could be the other way. There's so much of that Simon and Garfunkel. And I don't know if you felt this way, but they repeat these songs multiple times. And by the end of the movie, you're like, have I not heard this song 3 times already? Like, it just keeps coming back and back. And there's these montages to the music, which are great, but I don't know, it gets a little repetitive with
I really like Simon and Garfunkel, and I guess I remembered I guess I was thinking that this would have like a bunch of their songs, and it's like
3 songs, right?
It's like 3 songs that they repeat.
Yeah. But it works. It sets the tone.
It speaks to the moment.
How would you remake it?
Okay, so if we were going to remake this, so let's start with the family film version. What if a Hollywood studio wants us to make the family film version of The Graduate with Mrs. Robinson?
Mrs. Robinson.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, because this movie is, there's no way. I don't think you can keep this a family movie and keep the Benjamin Mrs. Robinson relationship, like the cheating. I don't know how you could keep that. That's what I was trying to think. Like, could you even keep the heart of the story? There's just no way. I don't know. I couldn't think of a way that you would make this a family story and still have them, having an affair together. I thought there was maybe something with, he always had a crush on Mrs. Robinson, and there was maybe going to be something, or he's always liked her, and then he realizes her daughter, but she's always seen him as like a kid that doesn't have his life together, doesn't like him, doesn't want him to date her daughter. He does anyway, and there can be some awkward falling out between the two, like they have now, or they rush into marriage and it's just not going to work out. There could be something there. I think that could be interesting to explore as well. But I don't know how you keep the affair part of this to make it family friendly.
No, yeah, that's a tricky one. I sort of approach this from a different angle, which is, breaking it down to what is this movie, and if you focus on it more as the kind of generational struggle and less on the seduction itself, then I thought,
Mm-hmm.
what if you flipped the relationships and the gender a little bit, and so what if you said it's Benjamin? What if you make? Let's assume that Benjamin is heterosexual, but we make the relationship Mr. Robinson, and we turn Elaine into a boy who is Benjamin's friend. Okay, so,
Mm-hmm.
but my point is this: like, what if we said we're exploring the same kind of like caught in between generation, caught in between growing up and not growing up, and so like, is what if he gets hired by Mr. Robinson to come work, and there's then this like uh dynamic of like, is Benjamin now the boss to his friend, or is Benjamin still friends with his friend? Benjamin's bonding with Mr. Robinson, but like, how does he then relate to the son of Mr. Robinson? I mean, it's a weird gender swap kind of, non-sexual kind of thing, but I think you could do something interesting with the dynamic of still playing with somebody has kind of leapfrogged their age peer into a relationship
Mm,
with the adult figure, and then not sure how to navigate those kind of power relationships. And I think you could
right.
explore that. It's like he's been hired to work in plastics, and now
Yep.
it's like, what do you do then if you're the boss to your friend, or you have a closer relationship with your friend's dad than your friend does? I mean, I think there's some things that you could explore there that would still get at some of the heart of what The Graduate is, even if not the seduction itself.
Yeah, that's a good idea of exploring that idea of it. It's almost like they have the movies where one of the friends is like a great athlete and they get onto the pros or something, and then they leave the other ones behind. And there's a dynamic of, oh, you think you're a big shot now because you've got this great job, or you're doing everything we wanted to do, and we're left behind. Or the kid who leaves a small town goes to the big town, becomes famous or something. But that idea of how do you relate to the people your own age when you've just jumped classes and you're now dealing with people that are in their 50s and 60s instead of kids in their 20s. That could be
Yeah.
worth exploring.
Yeah. Okay, what about the low budget or super high budget? How would you approach this?
Yeah, for low budget, I feel like this is probably pretty low budget. There's not a lot of special effects to this. It is a lot of drama. Um, I was wondering if you could. I was wondering if wanted to make this ultra low budget. The hook is Mrs. Robinson, so you got to stick with that. Could you get this? Could you get a full movie, hour and a half, out of Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson? I think that'd be tough. You do get pretty close. I mean, it goes pretty far. But if instead of they have that falling out at the end of, when they're in the hotel one time, and then it kind of moves on to him dating her daughter. But if you didn't have him move on to her dating her daughter, and you just kind of stayed with Mrs. Robinson, stayed with the how that would naturally end. Does the husband ever find out? Do his parents find out? The backlash of that. Do they actually end up, Mrs. Robinson and Benjamin, getting married or something? There's been movies who do that too.
Hmm.
I was thinking of, I think May December kind of explores that idea.
Oh yeah.
of an older woman who marries somebody younger, and then what happens as they age. And maybe this is like a prequel to that story, but there could be something there of just keeping it very contained with those few core people and not expanding it beyond that. For a low budget, what did you have?
Yeah, I mean, similar. I guess I was just thinking about like containing the location, and I just thought of the hotel, those funny scenes in the hotel
Oh,
lobby.
those are great.
I just think when he walks up, when he just nonchalantly folds up the card because he wrote his actual name on it. I mean, it's just so funny. But I think between that and I think the hotel room with Mrs. Robinson, but also Elaine coming to the hotel. I think you could have a lot of fun. Like if you said we need to set the entire movie in the hotel,
Hmm.
and you then are like, well, it's going to be him and Mrs. Robinson in the hotel. It's going to be Elaine coming to the hotel. It's going to be Mr. Robinson is coming for a work event at the hotel when Benjamin's there with, like, you could reshape things a little bit, but that it's all in the hotel. And I think that would be an interesting way of approach. It wouldn't be exactly the same story, but I think you could stay in one location and at least one building location because the lobby. So I wouldn't want to give up the lobby, but I think you could just set it in the hotel and still have like a lot of the story going on there. But
Hmm.
that would be as opposed to like the generational exploration film. I feel like this would be almost more like sex farce, like who's
Right.
figuring out like who's walking in on who and that kind of thing. So different aspect of the movie.
Almost like a different recreating of The Apartment, where you just have the
Yeah.
one apartment location and there's some kind of affairs going on at all times. People
Yeah.
come and go. Yeah.
Are you here for an affair?
Yeah. That's
Um,
so funny.
that's so good. Okay, and then what about TV show? Either an ongoing series or like a 10-part Netflix series.
I think there's potential here. Maybe you have this story, which this movie, I think you could expand on a little bit. You could have, if you were to do a few episodes of Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson, explore that for a while. I think at some point, so if you were to follow the story as is, you get to the end, you would need them to get married at the end, I think, for this to have any legs to just follow, okay, what happens now? Let's say they do go off and elope. And then what are they going to do? What comes after that? I think that could be an interesting show to be like hiding from your parents while also not really having jobs and needing money. You're married, but you're still very immature. I think there's potential there for that to be a series that could be funny and interesting. And maybe it ends up with them divorcing and that's how it ends. I don't know. But I'd be open to that idea of exploring that, like the fallout of this movie. What comes next could be interesting.
Yeah. There's a movie called Rumor Has It with Jennifer Aniston that is kind of a sequel to The Graduate, which
Hmm.
is but and I was thinking of, as you were talking about Ready or Not 2, just thinking about like different approaches that you can take to sequels. How do you connect it to the original? But Rumor Has It, I think it's basically like The Graduate as a movie exists in the world of that Rumor Has It, but like Jennifer Aniston's family is the family that it was based on. And so now it's
Mm.
like, what if they had made the movie The Graduate about your family, and now it's 20 years later?
Now it's when you said it. That could, yeah, that's another approach to this. Yeah.
So but I had this thought with TV. There's a there's this guy called Mustap Murad, who is he's a smart guy. Uh, he's a giant crypto guy, and he always does these like long talks about how like the current generation, especially the generation of young men, is more adrift than ever before. And people have forsaken religion, people have forsaken social engagement, people have looked for meaning in different political causes, in different social justice causes, but basically, people don't have a good central source of meaning anymore. People don't have jobs, or if they have jobs, they don't have job security. They don't have anything really grounding them, and they're not getting
Hmm.
married as much. They're not having relationships in the same way. He makes these really smart points, and then he always finishes that with, And that's why the only answer is buying this specific meme coin. And if you if you buy this meme coin, you then are part of something. And it's this very weird disconnect because it's he's he's a I mean I think he went to Princeton. I think he has a
Hmm.
PhD. Like he's a smart guy and his points are so well reasoned and I think are really insightful into our current state of affairs. But then it always ends in
The
how you need to buy
conclusion.
this specific meme coin and that is going to be the secret to your finding meaning in life. And I'm not sure about that conclusion, but I do think we live in a time now where people are adrift in a different way. And I don't think it's the same as the 1960s, but I think there is an aimlessness and a
Hmm.
like it's less about like sudden social changes like there were in the 60s, but I think a lot of the drift now is just about finding meaning in the world and with AI, with careers and job security and what's even worth exploring. I almost think like the sex aspect of The Graduate is not as relevant right now because I think that's
Hmm.
something where people that's not shocking to people. But I think like if you were to explore this in a departure, so not like a faithful TV version of The Graduate, but if you were to like update this as a show for today, like I think it would be people just sort of like trying to explore. I mean, and so maybe just off this Murad thing, it's a crypto people in crypto
Hmm.
trying to find meaning in life, and like how do you, the Mrs. Robinson is the you're buying SBX 6900 is Murad's meme
Right.
coin that he loves, but it's like you're trying to find this meaning, but that attempt to find meaning is still kind of empty. But we're watching different people sort of navigate through this kind of existence. I think that might be something. I don't know exactly how you do it on like I haven't thought through like the storytelling aspect of it, but I think in terms of like setting it as an ongoing TV show, I think that would be more relevant to today than the sort of like sexual awakening side of the
Hmm.
1960s.
That's true, because the finding meaning in life, that's still applicable today. That's always going to be the case. And if you were to put that in the modern age, that'd be the most accessible way to do this type of a story.
Well, would any of these be better than The Graduate?
I doubt it. I think this movie is pretty good. What do you think?
I don't think so. I also think, getting to the low budget thing again too. I think the acting is so strong. I think Dustin Hoffman
Yes.
and
Oh
he
man.
was in Tootsie, which is a big comedic performance. He's done some other comedy, but I think he's almost underrated as a comedic actor. He's
Yeah.
so funny.
Just so well done. I looked up the ages of them when this movie came out. He was 30 apparently, and Mrs. Robinson is like 36. Just the way they play it. So she's not that much older than me in the movie, but I think they play the parts very well. Like they do come across. He comes across as so young in this movie, the way that he plays it, and then she very much seems like an older woman. The acting doesn't give anything away for ages.
Well, and my understanding is that they originally wanted Robert Redford or a Robert Redford type to play
Oh,
Benjamin. And
yeah.
I'm like, I can see that, but I feel like that's a totally different movie.
Hmm.
Like I could see that I could see Mrs. Robinson being interested in Robert Redford,
Right.
but like I think that's a totally different movie if you do that.
Yeah, they really nailed it with Dustin Hoffman in this. He plays the bumbling kind of fool, like not knowing anything about life. Yeah, just it's his character is so perfect for a comedy. If you put him in like a Dumb and Dumber type thing, this kid is, I mean, he'd be great in something like that. So
Oh yeah.
he nailed
Yeah.
it.
Well, The Graduate. I think it's a really good film. Do you say great film, fun film? Like how significant of a film do you feel like this is when you're thinking of the great canon of cinema?
Right? Is it my favorite movie? No, I think it's a great film though. I think just how influential it was at the time, I think does a lot of the heavy lifting here. The fact that we still know about this, the fact that these scenes, like the images in the scenes, just stick with you. Very well directed in that way, but as far as like relevant to me in my life, no, not as much. Still a great movie.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to a time, and not all of that is relatable today. But I think a lot of it still is, and it draws such a clear look at what it's talking about that even if it is a different time, I think you could still connect with why that would be important to that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of I think the way that they shot like the Mrs. Robinson stuff, I think
Oh yeah.
I think it's really good because it's like kind of like provocative and sexy, but it's not over the top, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
that gives it almost like a timeless. Like if you were too reserved, then that would feel dated in a way, or if you were just like too upfront with the sex, it would
Mm-hmm.
be a different kind of vibe. I think it hits sort of a real nice medium there that really works, I think, for the long term.
It feels like the way that it's shot feels. If you were to do this today, you could shoot it the same way. I don't think you need to change anything about the directing.
Yeah, yeah, really strong movie, The Graduate. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really. I mean, I think it's an important film to see, and it's just not that the whole film is a laugh riot, but there's a
I
lot
laughed out
of
loud.
there is a lot of humor here.
Yeah.
And there we have it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of How to Make Films and Influence People. Check us out at howtomakefilmspodcast.com, and we'll see you next time.